Okay, so I understand that we are up and running on this Facebook Live. I'm Christine Birak. I'm a health and science reporter with CBC News. So welcome and thanks for joining us on the CBC News platforms and the Nationals Facebook page. Today, we are taking your questions about exercise, and we're in a good spot. We're in a fitness lab, I believe it is. Martin Gibala is the head of kinesiology here at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. Earlier this week, there was a study that I had covered about weekend warriors, and we talked to Martin about this. And basically it said that if you squeeze all your exercise into just a day or two, so exercise that some people spread over 3 to 5 days or even a week, you get substantial health benefits. And one of the topics that people have brought up with weekend warriors is also injuries, and we were just talking about that. So give us your sense, just to start us off while the questions come in. And like I said, give us your exercise questions. We've got an exercise expert here to take them, whether it's with regards to how much do you need, fitness, how you doing, how long, weight loss, which inevitably always comes up. But let's start with weekend warriors and how much exercise is recommended.
Yeah, the general rule of thumb is 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. Some guidelines will differentiate between moderate and vigorous intensity exercise. In Canada, the general recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous. So it can get confusing, but I think the general rule of thumb is about 2.5 hours per week of moderate exercise.
Okay, and so what constitutes moderate exercise?
Yeah.
Is me going for a walk, is that 30 minutes? Will that take away from my 2.5 hours?
It will. It does count. And so again, there's lots of ways to measure this, heart rate, all of these things. But if you're increasing your energy expenditure by about 3 times rest, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Obviously, you feel your heart rate get up a little bit, you're a little bit more out of breath. But moderate is still, you could maintain a conversation for sure. But there's lots of things that count. Really, our big thing is we just need to get people moving. The more we move, the better. Whether that's structured exercise or taking the stairs at work, all of these things sort of count and can add up through the day.
So that's 2.5 hours of moderate or an hour and 15 of vigorous, which is like heart racing in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the cutoff there is maybe 6 times what your resting energy expenditure would be, or maybe the cutoff is somewhere around 65% of maximal heart rate for those people that are interested in measuring that. The guidelines shift a little bit across different countries and different agencies.
And I think it's important just to mention the health benefits. So when it came to the weekend warriors, what they were saying is that the health benefits, which is your risk of dying in the next decade, goes down 30% as compared with somebody who is not doing any exercise. And that's death from all causes as well.
And I think that was a strength of the recent study in JAMA that got a lot of attention. They followed over 60,000 people and were able to look at actual death rates, mortality rates. And I think the take-home messages from that paper were 2 things. One is public health recommendations are best. So the greatest reduction in mortality was from the people getting the public health guidelines and spreading it out over the course of the week. But the encouraging news was if you're just not reaching the public health guidelines in terms of the total number of minutes, or if you're trying to pack all of that exercise into 1 or 2 sessions, you still had significant benefits in terms of your risk of dying. The worst, of course, are the folks that just remain sedentary, which is the big problem.
Yeah. Which some exercise is better than none, which is one of the big
major message that we want to leave people with.
We've got some
today.
comments that are coming in on our Facebook page. Remember, you can put your questions down in the comments section. Pardon me if I mispronounce some of these names, but I'm going to do my best. Okay, the first question is from Leonida Encheta, wants to know how to reduce belly fat. Always fitness kind of leads to weight loss, and people are looking for ways to...
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Great question. It's a lot easier to control body weight, body fatness by the energy inside of the equation, what we put in our mouth as opposed to energy expenditure through exercise. That's not to say at all that exercise can't be effective for weight management. It can, but if you sort of do the math on how much exercise would take to burn off that donut, it's a lot. So it's a little easier to manage both sides, but really control that energy inside of the equation. The other point that's really important to keep in mind is a lot of people think we exercise to lose weight and that's what confers fitness. No, there's a direct line there between exercise and fitness. And if we look at people, those who have comparable fitness, even if one group is overweight or obese and the other group is normal weight, their risk of dying is actually quite similar. So it speaks to this idea of, yes, we're all concerned about how we look, the numbers on the scale, but you really want to worry about that exercise for fitness component. To go to the question, it's really hard to spot reduced body fat. There's no way around that. So generally increasing energy expenditure to burn calories overall is good. And then obviously doing some core strengthening can tighten up the middle a little bit, but despite what you might read or see on the adverts, it's really hard to spot reduced body fat.
Yeah, so watch what you put in.
Simple message.
All right, the next question is from Mike Ayad, and he's asking, can you shed some light on exercise for lower back pain, which is a serious issue for a lot of people?
Yeah, certainly. I can relate. I'm someone who has low back pain. Again, generally speaking, I'm not an MD here or an expert in low back pain or a chiropractor, but I think generally exercise in general is good. Increasing blood flow to these various areas, and that. Of course, there's going to be certain exercises that are more suited than others. I think this is where low back pain is a huge catch-all term, and so trying to identify what's the specific reason for your low back pain is important. Again, just using myself as an example, I can find that cycling is okay for me. I'm not able to run anymore, but I think to answer the question, it's really trying to get a sense of why you're having low back pain. So that's referring to a chiropractor or a sports medicine expert to try and to find out. And once you know those exercises once you know that reason, trying to tailor the exercises that might be more or less suitable. So a lot of it is trial and error, and honestly, I can relate because it's such a frustrating condition.
Mm-hmm. All right, I hope that answers your question, Mike. The next question is from Danny Wise, and I think this actually leads into it nicely. Should just a rowing machine be enough to lose weight? We touched a bit on the weight, but I do feel like sometimes people like a certain exercise and they want to know, is that enough for me to just do this?
I think you find an exercise that you like and you stick with it. And so if you're someone that enjoys a rowing machine and that's your sort of go-to exercise, for sure. If you talk to my behavioral colleagues around here, they will say the more menu choices, the better. Variety is good, and so a lot of people get kind of bored just doing one type of exercise or the other, and so varying it up is good. But like I say, find something that works for you and you enjoy. You're more likely to stick with it over the long term, and consistency is key.
Okay, next question is from Dan Brennan, and he's asking, if you're on your feet at work, does that count for anything? And this is a good question, Dan, because I've wondered this too. I have a standing desk, so I try to vary it up. Does that make any difference?
It does count. So even people who can stand are going to have a lower mortality risk than those people who are just lying all day.
That are sitting all day.
Again, so anything is better than nothing. I have a standing desk as well. It goes back to the question about low back pain, and so varying up your positions through the day can help with that. So yeah, it's going to provide some benefit than just sitting all day. This whole idea of sedentary behavior, sedentary living. We even have sedentary guidelines now because we know we just need to move more in general. So I think the more you can move throughout the day is good. That's our big message here.
I think that's a great question, Dan. And I feel like this leads into when I'm standing, I feel more likely to leave my desk and walk around. And when I'm sitting, it's kind of like I'll swivel around, I'll do things, but if I'm standing, I'm more likely to also do something else.
Lots of us are wearing things like this these days. You can set the alarms just to remind you. Stand up, take a walk around the office, sit back down. Even if you're working at home, go do the stairs a couple of times. Go back to your desk.
It's a nice break sometimes too, just for a momentary break. Okay, thanks for that question, Dan. The next one is from Dina Al-Hashemi. She's asking, what's the recommended temperature for working out? Stair climbing, hiking, outside in winter?
There is no recommended temperature for working out. In Canada right now, we're generally not worried. One of the big worries, of course, is heat stress, right? So overheating during exercise, that's less of a concern generally in tough Canadian winters, although people can overheat a little bit if they dress too high. But again, generally, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Find a comfortable environment for you, and again, just try and be consistent.
And I don't know if this is pushing the temperature question, but this hot yoga, I feel like everybody's doing things in these hot rooms.
Sure.
Is there a sincere benefit to that?
Yeah, it can increase calorie burning a little bit. Again, I would come back to finding something that you like. If you enjoy that, nothing wrong with it. It can induce a bit more of a heat stress, and so that for some people that is something you have to just be mindful of, making sure you're hydrating properly. I think for most folks, just use common sense, right? We're all pretty good at our own sense of exertion. If it seems like you're heating up too much, then maybe take a break. But generally, exercising in a hotter environment is going to result in a little bit more calorie burning, but that's not something we would recommend. Don't go out there and try and induce this big heat stress. Maybe just exercise.
You mean I can't speed things up?
Just pick up the intensity, right?
Yeah.
If you're about efficiency, just boost the intensity a little bit. Right. You're gonna get the same effect.
All right, for Facebook users who may be just joining us, my name's Christine Birak. I'm a health and science reporter with CBC. We're sitting here with exercise expert Martin Gibala. We're at McMaster University. If you look down in the comments, if you've got some exercise questions, send them through to us, and we are asking them, and they are coming in, and some great questions. Okay, the next one is from Ashley Ann, and she's asking, would love to hear some thoughts on low-carb, high-fat diets when our Canadian food pyramid will be revised to reflect new science.
Yeah, the dietary advice can be extremely complicated. I think in general we want moderate carbohydrate intake. I'm not an RD, and so I think for an individual, the important thing here is to get some qualified advice. If you're worried about your own nutritional practice, see a registered dietitian who can talk to you, evaluate your needs. Generally speaking, low carb diets are getting lots of headlines right now. If you're an active individual, you do need adequate carbohydrate. It's important for people to remember that carbohydrate is king when it comes to exercise. So if you're exercising for performance, certainly you need to have adequate carbohydrate on board. If you're just generally exercising for health, weight management, then those people don't necessarily need very high carbohydrate, and lower carbohydrate can certainly play a role there. But again, I think you don't want to be relying on the internet. You want to be relying on qualified, in this case, nutritional advice, and getting a consult there with a registered dietitian who can look at your own eating patterns and your goals and your needs is a good strategy.
All right, Karen Fraser is asking about yoga and fitness generally. So I'm going to take the opportunity to ask, given your experience and all that you guys see and do and experiment with here, what's your best fitness tip?
My best fitness tip would be find an exercise that you like and stick with it. Consistency is key. We could, even going back to the nutrition question, we can say exercising in the morning after an overnight fast. So if you have not much carbohydrate on board, that's going to burn a few more calories from fat during exercise. And that's true. But if you're a person who, one, hates exercise in the morning, or two, loves to eat breakfast, it's not very good advice for you because you're unlikely to stick with it. So again, find something you like, stick with it. That would be number one.
And I think one of the biggest hurdles people have is thinking about the time commitment, that I don't have time to exercise. What advice do you give them when it comes to getting over that mental hurdle of I don't have the time and I don't want to make the time?
First, a couple thoughts is, when we look at the public health guidelines, it's about 2% of your week, so it's not a particularly onerous amount, especially when we think about
2.5 hours in a week. 2.5 is what's recommended.
And so for some people, clearly it's an excuse, but a lot of us lead very busy, time-pressed lives. Certainly in our laboratory, we've been very interested in this idea of time-efficient exercise and using interval training, for example, or pushing the intensity in order to confer health benefits. So I think time is a real factor. The other thing to keep in mind is breaking it up through the day. So we just did a study that was looking at brief bouts of stair climbing, 3 20-second stair climbing bursts throughout the day. It's a minute of hard exercise. It's not much. Very effective in terms of boosting people's cardiorespiratory fitness.
3 20-second bursts
of exercise. It doesn't take a lot. So this is not at all to say that the public health guidelines are not good. They're based on really good science. But we know the vast majority of people are not listening, and the number one cited barrier is time. So what people need to take away is even doing some exercise is better than nothing, and boosting the intensity can be extremely effective.
Okay, this actually on the opposite end, I think. Sean Roberts is asking, how much rest is required after a day of strenuous activity, a day of skiing or something like that? How much time does the body need to recover?
Yeah, great question. Again, we can have these very detailed answers. It does depend a little bit on the type of exercise. And so if it's something like skiing, long distance running, those types of things, the muscle damage that you incur from that can be greater than if you're doing less weight-bearing activity like cycling or rowing or something like that. So we tend to worry more about unaccustomed exercise, and unaccustomed might be pushing harder than normal or doing something that you're not used to, and that I think is where listening to your body is important. As rudimentary as that sounds, if you're feeling sore, taking some extra time is important. We also know that feeling of soreness goes away pretty quickly. There's something known as the repeated bout effect. So if you were to do that vigorous bout of skiing the second time, the associated muscle soreness and the associated recovery then is less. So it really depends. Listen to your body.
Listen to your body. That's good advice. Okay, Makeda, I hope I'm saying that right. Makeda Martin asks, pointers for active boomers who aren't into extreme fitness routines. What do you know about trends or die-hard routines keeping that sector engaged? Exercise as you age is...
Yes. Sure. Again, I would say bearing it up. So if something we were talking earlier about, I like to run. I can't run anymore because of knee, joint problems, things like that. So for some boomers, as they're aging, trending a little bit more towards less weight-bearing activities, so moving your main cardio exercise from running to maybe biking or swimming or rowing, offloading the joints a little bit, because a lot of people are stopping exercise or giving up exercise because they're in pain, and a lot of it is joint pain, and it's the cartilage, the tendons that tends to go a little bit more as we age. So that's certainly one tip is vary it up and try and move a little bit more towards less weight-bearing activity to avoid the soreness. This is now the joint soreness, which is different from muscle soreness.
And listening to your body again. What can you take?
Come back to that.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I just want to connect with Facebook viewers who might be just joining us. We are at McMaster University and we're talking about exercise. So below in the comments section, if you've got questions about exercise, you're getting out into the gym, it's the new year, how to stick with it. We've got Martin Gibala here. He's taking your questions. We've had some great ones so far, so let's keep going here. So Laura Lewecko asks, age, gender, background, type of muscle fibers makes a big difference on a workout. Why don't fitness coaches talk more about that?
Yeah, good question. I think again, if someone is serious about getting into exercise, they might want to talk to a certified professional. In Canada, we have the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, which is really the gold standard in terms of fitness certifications. So I think if people are looking for exercise advice, it can be bewildering. You're not sure what is this person's credentials or that. So I think you want to talk to a qualified fitness professional and look for someone that might have that CSEP certification. That person, just like a financial planner, they should be talking to you. What are your goals? What's your specific situation? What are some unique aspects of you, so you're not just getting this generic advice? But it's a conundrum. If you're the individuals that set public health policy, you don't want to overcomplicate the message too much, and that's why
a lot is lost when you overcomplicate.
Just get moving. 150 minutes a week, that works for most people, and that's good advice. But if you're someone who is, well, what about me as an individual? Then someone should be looking a little bit more. Maybe assessing your body composition. I don't think we can predict your fiber type without a real invasive measure. But the point there is talking about your specific goals, your specific situation. That's sort of the value added that I think you're going to get with a good certified fitness professional.
All right. Our next question is from Sushil Pokharel. She asks, what kind of exercise helps for rheumatoid arthritis patient, as in time all joints are badly painful? So this touches a bit on what we were saying before. As time goes on, there are certain exercises that don't work for you anymore.
No, for sure. And again, this is where I think I'm not a medical doctor, so I think you need to have a managed perspective on this. Certainly talk to your physician about what might be appropriate and suitable for you. I'm thinking going back to these less weight-bearing activities, which is going to minimize the joint stress, the joint pain. So maybe activities like swimming. Swimming can be a fabulous exercise, especially for those sorts of individuals. But again, I know that's a very frustrating condition because you're not worried about just one joint. It's all of those joints.
Okay, this next question, it kind of makes me smile because I've thought about this before. Don Riches is asking, what kind of exercise can you do while you're cleaning your house? And how long must you do that for?
Yeah, I would go back to taking the stairs a little bit. So, you might be cleaning the house, you're dusting, you got to go upstairs, whatever. Up and down the stairs a couple of times, working it into your day. Maybe doing some body weight style interval training. This idea of just air squats, right? Where you're just doing a couple of squats if your knees can take it. Maybe you can do a couple of push-ups, jumping jacks. These sort of old style calisthenic type exercise, working those in while you're cleaning the house through the day. Another one's a commercial workout. If you're sitting there and you're watching your favorite show, even if you're streaming it, take a break, do a series of jumping jacks or taking the stairs. It can be very effective. And so the idea here is like fitting the exercise into your day, right? So you don't have to structure your life around exercise, trying to find a way to fit in these exercise snacks that we were talking about.
Right.
This idea of snacking just means, again, breaking the exercise up into these small manageable bits, which can be as short as 20 seconds, a minute, but you do that a couple of times through the day. It can be very effective, even more effective than someone who might do all the exercise in a single block of time.
It all adds up, and it's interesting when people do single block of time and it is the new year. I think sometimes people feel they miss a few sessions, they were going to go to that class, and then they kind of feel like they're off track. But this is a good mentality where it comes to, so what? Okay, you missed a week, you missed that class. Just keep going.
For a lot of folks, if you don't get your hour in the day, you tend to blow off your workout. Oh, I only got 15 minutes or so. No, the message is you can really get something in, even if it's just moving. Get up and move around. Ideally, you want to do something a little bit more vigorous if you're worried about sort of making up for the overall activity.
That's great advice. Okay, our next question is from Kathy Patterson. How does a woman age 61 counteract the drop in metabolism when it comes to trying to lose some weight?
Yeah, again, great question. Like it or not, our genes in part determine what our metabolism is. People talk about boosting their metabolism through food or exercise. I think the answer there is you need to be active. And so by increasing your activity, that increases your metabolic rate, and you continue to burn calories a little bit more in recovery. And this goes back to the idea of intensity. If you push the pace a little bit more during the exercise, it takes the body longer to come back to its normal metabolism, whatever that level is. So it's really hard to change your intrinsic set metabolism. Really what we're talking about is pushing outside of that normal range. And the best way to do that is through exercise. And you can't counteract some of these age-related declines in metabolism. Either you're looking at boosting the energy expenditure part through exercise, or you're reducing energy intake a little bit, because it's one of these inevitable facts of aging that we all have to deal with a little bit.
Reducing intake means eating less.
Yeah, sorry.
So you
Simple
don't
message,
have as
right?
much
Quit
to
talking
burn.
science so much.
Okay, so this question is one that I think a lot of people would ask, and I think we've covered it in bits, but I don't think it hurts to ask it again. James McDonald, what do you say to people that say, I don't have enough money, I work long hours, which makes me tired, and then I can't afford a gym membership either?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to answer the monetary question first is there's nothing special about a gym. Like obviously, if you're able to afford it, you're able, and that motivates you to exercise. Obviously, it's great. But something we're learning and something we're really trying to stress in our own research is exercise, functional exercise, people can do on their own in your house. Body weight style workouts, these old calisthenic style training, jumping jacks, push-ups, things like that. And there's countless examples on the internet. I know beware the internet a little bit, but there's an individual, Millionaire Hoy. I'll give him a plug. I don't know him at all. My wife does some of his workouts. Really simple, functional workouts you can do at home. And his whole goal, he's from the south side of Chicago. It's about bringing exercise to people that might not have the financial means to buy that gym membership. So that's the money side of things. You can really do exercise on the cheap. Going to the issue of folks that are busy and work in jobs that they're outside all day, it can be a challenge. I think my strategy there was, if you can, boost the intensity a little bit a couple times. You might be tired from generally working outside all day, but again, maybe taking the stairs a couple of times. Doesn't have to demand a huge amount of time, but get that boost in intensity in a couple of times, and that's going to help with your fitness. And we know that boosting the fitness is what's going to lower your risk of dying and lowering your risk of developing all these diseases like cardiovascular disease, like type 2 diabetes, even cancer.
That's a great question and a good answer. It's do what you can, and there are all kinds of things around us. There are staircases everywhere, and fit it in where you can. It doesn't have to be daunting.
Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Some people get down if they're not meeting the public health guidelines. Again, go back to the JAMA study early this week. Even doing something much better than doing nothing. So
Absolutely.
Moving out from that completely sedentary to just doing a little bit of activity, that boosts, that's the biggest bang for your buck in terms of benefit.
And I think people, you feel good about yourself, even
Absolutely.
if you just got it in as a burst. Hey, you did it. It's done. It was maybe even less than a minute, and that's good.
Someone my behavioral colleagues, they study things like mood, motivation, adherence. And so for a lot of people, if they can't do 30 minutes at a continuous steady state pace. So break it up. They're basically doing interval training. And so it's celebrate that success. Hey, I'm an interval trainer now. I can do a bit of exercise, take a break, do it again. So don't beat yourself up. If you can't meet the guidelines right now, start slow and build from there.
Yeah, and breaking it up into, and these are words that Martin used, breaking it up into snack size pieces is something you've written about as well, or writing about.
It is. Again, interval training is very well suited for that, and lots of research now showing that it might even be a more beneficial way to go, especially for controlling things like blood sugar, which is a big risk for diabetes.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. It's from Ruta Regina. She asks, does exercise have to involve the whole body to be effective? What happens when you're unable to exercise the lower half of your body due to severe arthritis? Good question.
Yeah, no, the short answer is it doesn't have to include your whole body. And even, we talk about raising the intensity in that. You can get the intensity up pretty high even by just utilizing the upper body. Here at McMaster, we have people who have suffered a spinal cord injury. They're going to come and train just in the gym right over there. They can exercise just with their upper body, doing upper arm ergometer type exercise. So there's lots of ways to get this cardiovascular boost or this fitness boost, even if you're not doing whole body exercise. So the short answer is no, you don't need to use your whole body at all in order for exercise to be effective.
Okay, good question. All right, let's move on to the next one from Christian Robert Driscoll. He's asking, would you recommend a juice fast for weight loss?
I don't want to be facetious there. There is some evidence around intermittent fasting being beneficial. So going on a prolonged fast, I don't think that's the most effective way to go in the long run. But periods of sort of intermittent fasting, I think really what we're talking about is changing your lifestyle. So whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, it's finding something that's going to fit into your life and you can maintain over the long term. So we just need to look at the evidence. People that go on diets, it's really hard because they don't stick with it.
It's not part of their daily routine.
Exactly.
Whereas if you decide, I'm going to stop taking maybe the subway from this stop to this stop, I'm going to walk half of that.
That's right.
So it's kind of like integrating it. So it's something you need to do anyway, but it helps you get moving at the same time.
Making a habit's going to be the best way to go, and something you can stick with over the long term.
Okay, I have a question here from Sam McWhitter. He's asking high intensity interval training. So this goes back to what we had talked about, 20 seconds of exercise, 10 seconds of rest, or circuit training, or both. So if you were to recommend, does one have advantages over the other?
No, sure. So interval training is just this idea of alternating periods of a burst of exercise, taking a break, and a burst again. There's really two main groups. So that type of interval training that he was referring to, the 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, some viewers may be familiar with Tabata style training, and this is the really extreme training where you're going as hard as you can.
Actually, you wrote that. I wasn't sure if that was a word.
No, a very informed question for sure. Tabata style training demands that super intense exercise. We've studied in our lab as well as others. It's very effective. And a lot of people think that's the only way to do interval training, this sort of all out as hard as you can go. No. Interval style training can also be walking faster for a couple of light posts and then backing off. The take-home point, I think, is the more intense the exercise, the less you need to get a benefit. And so you can do these very short, vigorous bouts of exercise. They can be very effective. They're not necessarily suited for everyone. And so for those types of individuals, doing some sort of other interval training, more traditional, high-intensity interval training, can be effective. If I can give a plug here, we're doing a lot of research around this, and I have a book coming out on interval training, trying to distill down the science and put it into practical, accessible messages for everyone. It's going to be on the shelves next month.
Yeah, this has been a bit of a specialty. We've come to talk about to Martin before about interval training in particular, and it gets a lot of attention because people have so little time. So if I could wrap up a workout, everybody's ears perk up if I could do it in less time. And it sounds like from everything I've heard from you, it can work. But again, it requires the dedication, and you have to do it.
There's no free lunch at the end of the day. If you want these short workouts, you got to go hard, right?
Yep.
And so these very intense flavors of interval training, they're extremely demanding. That can be tough. It's not for everyone. But the other point that I'll make is many more people than we think can perform and benefit from an interval-based approach. Even people with cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. Obviously you want to check with your physician to be cleared, but lots of good evidence showing that interval training can be beneficial in a time-efficient way for people with all of these different conditions.
Mm-hmm. And when's your book coming out, by the way?
It's going to be out February 7th. It's called The 1 Minute Workout.
Oh, 1 minute.
Teaser headline, of course, but we talk about lots of different styles of interval training. We touch on the psychology. There's a chapter on diet.
Which people are very interested in. For anybody who may be just joining us, we're doing a Facebook Live on exercise. We're here at McMaster University. We're going to be wrapping up soon, so if you want to get your question in, you can put it into the comments, and we'll put it to Martin Gibala, our exercise expert. He's the head of kinesiology here at McMaster. Okay, we'll take a few quick questions here. Christopher Gross is asking, I have ruptured L4, 5, 6, 8 months ago. I have to wait another 9 months until there is system ability to proceed with electric shock to release my muscles. What can I do as exercise to help strengthen my core to prepare it for recovery?
Yeah, wow, tough question. And again, that's where I think if you're talking about disc ruptures, you really want to be talking to a back expert to find out what type of exercise might be suitable for you. So I'm very treading carefully around that one. I'm thinking exercise that is still, arm exercise, lower leg exercise that's not going to in any way stress the lower spine or put any stress on those delicate vertebrae or those ruptured discs. But I think that's where you want some very serious managed care from a true back expert and a spine orthopedic expert.
Okay, I have a question that I think I was surprised to see, but I think it's a very good question. It's from James McDonald, and he's asking, any tips for gaining weight for those who are underweight?
Yeah,
Not a problem many people have. But
a lot of people question. Don't. That question's infuriating. But certainly my colleague Stu Phillips, he studies building muscle and everything like that, and they'll find these individuals. They call them hard gainers, right? Even though they exercise a lot, they lift a lot of weights. You could take 10 people. Give them all the same exercise nutrition program. Some are going to gain 10 pounds of muscle, some not going to gain muscle at all. I think that's where diet does play a role. So first thing is, for those people, you need to be in a state of positive energy balance, eating more so that you're having the calories that you can start to gain weight. This is where protein feeding following exercise, manipulating your protein intake can very much play a role. We talk about this anabolic window after resistance training. Definitely heavy resistance exercise or heavy weightlifting with protein feeding following exercise. Very effective. Multiple bouts of protein feeding. So it's a good question. A lot of folks are jealous of the people that have to, deal with that type of problem.
But I'm sure for people it must be infuriating on their end too, because just very few people would even have any sympathy.
On the other work that my colleagues do, the holy grail of exercise is putting on muscle while you're losing fat.
Oh.
Very challenging, but there is some evidence it can be successful with a higher protein approach. Again, this is where you need the dietitian advice here if you're really serious about this, but increasing total protein intake can be effective during a period of weight loss. It will serve to minimize some of the muscle mass that you lose, and in fact you might be able to reach that holy grail of reducing some of the fat and still increasing your lean mass.
Okay, we're talking protein, but we got a question about carbohydrates from Mark Haddad. He's asking, cutting carbohydrates, do you need to do it to lose weight?
No, you can't get around the first law of thermodynamics, I'll tell my students, which is the energy in, energy outside of things. And so we know that there's definitely, there's populations that eat almost entire carbohydrate and yet are very lean. So it's not necessarily the carbohydrate that are bad. Also, this is important, many different types of carbohydrate, good and bad carbohydrates. Fruits and vegetables are almost entirely carbohydrate. Those are good things to eat. What we want to be limiting for a lot of individuals are the refined sugars. So even talking about carbohydrate, you need to understand, and rather than talking nutrients, let's get back to talking about real foods. Right? Mm-hmm. And so there's something called the DASH diet, which is really just reflected in most public health guidelines. High fruits and vegetables. Very hard to overeat fruits and vegetables, right? They're good for us. Lots of good minerals. They provide fiber, satiety, all things like that. So rather than talk about carbohydrate, let's talk about foods. Trying to eliminate and reduce refined sugars is a good strategy. Lots of fruits and vegetables, good strategy. Just like fats, good fats and bad fats. Eating some nuts, walnuts, things like that, almonds, are good fats. There's other types of fats that are less good.
So less packaged food and more cooking, which takes time.
When you go to the grocery store, shop on the perimeter, right? Not so much in the middle. The perimeter tends to be fruits and vegetables, everything like that. These are some simple things that you can work in. Nothing wrong with Canada's Food Guide. It's a boring message for a lot of folks. It is being revamped, but this idea, eating high amounts of fruits and vegetables as a start is a really good strategy.
Yeah, and if you buy fruits and vegetables, then you got to eat them before they go bad. So it's motivation.
Goes back to the finance piece.
Exactly, you don't want to waste your money. All right, these have been great questions. Martin, I want to thank you so much. Thank you guys for your questions. That's going to wrap up our Facebook Live for today. And remember, the takeaway message, and I feel like this was really important, some exercise is better than none. And don't beat yourself up if you've gotten off routine. As Martin said, just do little bits and that'll get you through. Thank you.